Captain Thomas Anderson stood at the main viewport of the U.S. Nova, watching Jupiter's swirling storms in the distance. The massive red spot, a storm that had raged for centuries, seemed peaceful from here. The ship's quantum drive hummed softly through the deck plates, a sound he had grown used to over the past 6 months of patrols. "Another quiet day in space," he muttered, taking a sip from his coffee mug. The Nova was Earth's pride and joy, the first ship equipped with the revolutionary quantum drive. She was beautiful. A sleek, dark gray vessel stretching nearly 1,000 feet from bow to stern, armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. "Captain." Lieutenant Rachel Miller's voice cut through his thoughts. She sat at the sensor station, her blonde hair tied back in a regulation bun, her face lit by the blue glow of her screens. "I'm picking up something strange beyond Neptune's orbit." Anderson walked over to her station, frowning. "Define strange, Lieutenant." "Energy readings unlike anything in our database, sir." "They're growing stronger." Her fingers flew across the touchscreen, adjusting the sensors. "At first I thought it was a malfunction, but 3 separate systems are showing the same thing." James Cooper, the weapons specialist, spoke up from his station. "Sir, whatever it is, it's big. Really big." The young officer's face was pale as he studied his own readings. "And there's more than one." "Sound general quarters," Anderson ordered. Immediately, the ship's alert system began to pulse, red lights flooding the bridge. "Get me Chief Engineer Wells." Patricia Wells' voice came through the intercom seconds later. "Wells here, Captain." "Pat, I need everything you can give the sensors. We've got something weird out there." "On it, sir. Diverting power now." The bridge crew worked in tense silence for the next few minutes. Anderson watched the main screen as the sensor data became clearer. The energy signatures were moving fast, too fast for any known propulsion system. Suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open. Brilliant points of light appeared in the void, like new stars being born. But these weren't stars. As Anderson and his crew watched in stunned silence, massive ships began emerging from the light. Not 1 or 2, but hundreds. "My God," Miller whispered. "They're ships. Alien ships." The vessels were unlike anything humans had designed. They looked almost organic, with smooth, curved hulls that seemed to flow like liquid metal. The smallest was twice the size of the Nova, while the largest— Anderson's mind struggled to comprehend the scale of the flagship. It could have swallowed a small moon. "Battle stations," Anderson ordered, his voice steady despite the fear trying to claw its way up his throat. "Get me Earth Defense Command. Priority 1. The face of Admiral Michael Hayes appeared on the screen within seconds. The older man's expression was grim. "We're seeing it, Tom. Every telescope in the system just lit up like Christmas." Before Anderson could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered. A new signal, overwhelming their communication systems with its power. The image that appeared wasn't human. The alien was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin was pale gray, its eyes too large and entirely black. When it spoke, its words were somehow in perfect English, though its mouth movements didn't match. "People of Earth," it said, its voice deep and resonant, "your isolation ends today. We are the Dominion, and we have come to claim this system. Your technology has advanced enough to attract our attention. Submit to our rule, and you may live as our subjects. Resist, and we will reduce your cities to ash. You have 24 hours to surrender your world." The signal cut off, leaving the bridge in silence. Admiral Hayes' face reappeared. "Tom, the Nova is all we've got that might stand a chance against them. The rest of the fleet is years behind your ship's capabilities." Anderson looked at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were ready. They had trained for this, even if they'd never truly believed this day would come. "Understanding, Admiral," he replied. "Request permission to engage the enemy fleet." Hayes nodded solemnly. "Permission granted, Captain." Show them what one Earth ship can do. Anderson turned to his crew. Well, folks, looks like we're about to earn our pay. Lieutenant Miller, plot us an intercept course. Mr. Cooper, warm up all weapons systems. Engineer Wells, I need the quantum drive ready for combat maneuvers. He settled into his command chair, his voice firm with determination. We may be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched. Not yet. The U.S. Nova turned gracefully in space, her engines flaring bright as she moved to face the alien Armada. Humanity's first interstellar war was about to begin, and Earth's most advanced battleship was all that stood between humanity and extinction. Defense Secretary Emily Richardson paced the floor of the Pentagon's crisis room, her heels clicking against the polished tiles. Screens covered every wall, showing different views of the massive alien fleet. The room buzzed with nervous energy as military officers and civilian leaders debated their options. We can't seriously be considering surrender, she said, stopping in front of Admiral Hayes's chair. The Admiral looked tired, his uniform wrinkled from the hours since the aliens had appeared. Of course not, Hayes replied, rubbing his eyes. But we need to buy time. Our ground forces aren't ready for a full-scale invasion, and the Nova is our only ship with technology advanced enough to stand a chance. The main screen switched to a live feed from the U.S. Nova. Captain Anderson's face appeared, looking determined despite the pressure. Admiral, Secretary Richardson, he nodded to them both. The alien fleet hasn't made any aggressive moves yet, but they're spreading out in a standard combat formation. They know what they're doing. How many ships are we looking at, Captain? Richardson asked. Lieutenant Miller counts 327 vessels, ma'am. Most are destroyer class or larger. Their flagship alone is bigger than anything we've ever built. Anderson paused, then added, but we found something interesting. Pat, show them. Chief Engineer Wells appeared next to Anderson, holding up a tablet. The alien ships are putting out massive energy readings, but there's a pattern to them. Their shields operate on a frequency we might be able to match with our quantum drive. Hayes leaned forward. What are you suggesting? If we modify our weapons to sync with their shield frequency, we might be able to hurt them, Wells explained. It's like hitting a bell at just the right note to make it shatter. Richardson stepped closer to the screen. How long do you need? 4 hours minimum, Wells replied. But the modifications could burn out our drive. It's a big risk. Before anyone could respond, all screens flickered. The alien commander appeared again, its black eyes seeming to stare into everyone's souls. Your time grows short, it announced. We detect your primitive weapons being prepared. This is futile. Submit now, and we will be merciful. Continue to resist, and we will make examples of your largest cities. The screen split, showing live feeds of New York, London, Tokyo, and other major cities. The message was clear. Millions would die if Earth fought back. Anderson's face returned to the main screen. Admiral, request permission to begin evacuation of major population centers. If this goes wrong. Already started, Richardson cut in. We're moving people underground or into the countryside, but we can't evacuate everyone in time. Hayes stood up, his decision made. Captain Anderson, you have new orders. Take the Nova out to Saturn's rings. The debris field will give you cover while Engineer Wells makes her modifications. If you can hurt them, even a little, it might make them think twice about attacking Earth. And if it doesn't work, Richardson asked quietly. Then at least we go down fighting, Hayes replied. He turned back to the screen. You have 4 hours, Captain. Make them count. On the Nova's bridge, Anderson turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Mr. Cooper, work with Engineer Wells on those weapons modifications. Lieutenant Miller, plot us a course through the alien fleet to Saturn. We'll need your best flying to get us there in one piece. What about the aliens, sir? Miller asked, her hands already moving over her controls. They'll try to stop us. Anderson smiled grimly. Let them try. Our quantum drive is faster than anything they've shown us so far. We'll give them a chase to remember." The Nova's engines hummed louder as power built in her core. The alien fleet loomed ahead, their massive ships blocking the stars. But between their formations, Anderson could see a path. "All hands, secure for emergency maneuvers," he announced shipwide. "Engineering, give us everything the drive has. Weapons, keep our point defense ready. They might have some surprises for us." He settled into his command chair, buckling in. "Lieutenant Miller, take us out. Full speed." The Nova shot forward like a bullet from a gun, her quantum drive pushing her to speeds no human ship had ever achieved before. As they approached the alien blockade, enemy ships began to turn, their weapons charging. The chase was on, and the next 4 hours would determine the fate of Earth. The Nova streaked past the first line of alien ships, leaving them scrambling to pursue. Behind them, the countdown to humanity's deadline continued to tick away, each second bringing them closer to either salvation or extinction. The U.S. Nova raced through space, leaving a trail of frustrated alien ships in her wake. Captain Anderson watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy vessels fell further behind. Their quantum drive was proving its worth, pushing them ahead of the pursuit. "Status report," Anderson called out, gripping his chair as the ship made another sharp turn. "Drive is holding steady," Engineer Wells reported from below decks. The sound of tools and hurried footsteps came through her comm channel. "But these modifications are tricky, Captain. One wrong move, and we could blow ourselves up." Lieutenant Miller kept her eyes on her navigation screens. 30 minutes to Saturn's rings, sir. But we got company coming in from the side. They're trying to cut us off." Anderson studied the new threat. 5 alien ships had appeared to their right, attempting to block their path. They were smaller than the others, probably their version of fast attack craft. "Mr. Cooper, target those ships," Anderson ordered. "Warning shots only. Let's see how they react to our weapons." Cooper's fingers danced across his console. The Nova's forward guns came to life, sending bright pulses of energy across the alien ships' paths. The effect was immediate. The enemy vessels scattered, clearly not expecting such accurate fire. "They're backing off," Cooper reported, grinning. "Looks like they don't like our targeting systems." Down in engineering, Wells and her team worked frantically on the weapon modifications. Sparks flew as they rewired systems that were never meant to be connected. The quantum drive's core pulsed with blue light, its energy ready to be redirected into the weapons. "Hand me that quantum spanner," Wells called to her assistant. She lay on her back under a control panel, sweat dripping from her forehead. "If we can't match their shield frequency exactly, this whole plan falls apart." The ship shuddered as they took a glancing hit from long-range enemy fire. Anderson's voice came through the intercom. "How's it coming, Pat? Those aliens aren't going to give up chasing us." "We're at 40% completion," Wells replied. "But Captain, there's something else. I think I can boost our shields too." The quantum drive could pump more power into them than they're rated for. "What's the catch?" Wells crawled out from under the panel, wiping grease from her hands. "It could tear the ship apart. The structural integrity field wasn't designed for this kind of power." Up on the bridge, Anderson shared a look with Miller. "How long can we survive with boosted shields?" "Maybe 20 minutes before the hull starts to buckle," Wells answered. "But those would be 20 minutes where we'd be nearly invincible." Another hit rocked the ship, stronger this time. Cooper checked his readings. "Sir, they're bringing up their bigger guns. The ones in back are starting to get better at targeting us." Anderson made his decision. "Pat, work on both modifications. We'll need every advantage we can get." He opened a channel to the whole ship. "All hands, this is the captain speaking. I won't lie to you. What we're about to try has never been done before. The next few hours will push this ship and every one of us to our limits." He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. Their faces showed fear, but also determination. Each of you volunteered for this post, knowing the Nova was an experimental ship. Now it's time to show the universe what experiments from Earth can do. That's all. Miller suddenly straightened in her chair. Captain, we're approaching the rings, but I'm picking up movement ahead. The main screen showed Saturn's magnificent rings stretching out before them. But among the ice and rock, shapes were moving. More alien ships had been waiting for them. They predicted our course, Cooper said quietly. They're not as dumb as we hoped. Anderson leaned forward. Lieutenant Miller, take us into the densest part of the rings. Let's see how well they can fight in a field of debris. He switched channels. Pat, we're about to test your shield modifications ahead of schedule. Stand by. The Nova turned toward a thick band of ice and rock fragments, her hull gleaming in Saturn's reflected light. Behind them, the alien pursuit fleet grew larger. Ahead, more enemy ships emerged from hiding places in the rings. They were surrounded. All hands, battle stations, Anderson ordered. Helm full speed ahead. Engineering, give us those boosted shields. Weapons, stand by on all banks. He allowed himself a small smile. Let's show them how humans fight when we're cornered. The Nova plunged into Saturn's rings, ice and rock bouncing off her shields as enemy fire began to light up space around them. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity's only advanced starship was ready to make her stand. The U.S. Nova twisted through Saturn's rings like a shark through coral. Ice chunks the size of buildings shattered against her enhanced shields, creating a glittering trail in her wake. Lieutenant Miller's hands flew over her controls, guiding the massive ship through gaps that seemed impossibly small. 3 enemy ships closing from behind, Cooper reported from weapons. 2 more trying to cut across our path through the rings. Captain Anderson nodded. Pat, how are those shields holding? 15 minutes of boost time left before we risk hull damage. Engineer Wells called back. Her voice was strained. The good news is I'm at 75% on the weapons modifications. A massive explosion lit up space to their right as an alien ship fired into the rings, trying to clear a path to them. Ice and rock sprayed everywhere, bouncing off the Nova's shields in a deadly hail. They're getting frustrated, Miller said with a slight smile. They can't use their full speed in here without risking collision. We're the only ones with shields strong enough to push through the debris. Anderson saw an opportunity. Mr. Cooper, target the debris field they just created. Full spread of torpedoes. Cooper grinned. Aye, sir. The Nova's torpedo tubes spat out a dozen projectiles. They struck the floating field of ice and rock, creating an even bigger cloud of high-speed debris. 2 alien ships caught the full blast, their weaker shields flickering under the impact. Direct hit, Cooper cheered. Their shields are weakening. But the victory was short-lived. A massive shadow fell over the Nova as the alien flagship emerged from behind Saturn itself. It was huge, nearly 20 times their size. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Oh hell, Miller whispered. Sir, that thing's gravity is affecting the ring debris. It's creating a clear path for their other ships. Anderson watched as the smaller alien vessels formed up behind their flagship. They had nowhere left to run. Pat, he called down to engineering. We need those weapons now. 2 minutes. She shouted back over the sound of sparking electronics. Maybe less. The alien flagship opened fire. Even with their boosted shields, the Nova shuddered under the impact. Warning lights flashed across every console. Shields at 60% and dropping, Cooper reported. Whatever they're hitting us with, it's cutting right through. Anderson made a quick decision. Lieutenant Miller, plot us a course straight at that flagship. All power to forward shields. Miller turned to stare at him. Sir, they want to play chicken. Anderson's eyes were fixed on the massive ship ahead. Let's play. They may be bigger, but I bet they're not crazy enough to let us ram them at quantum speeds. Miller turned back to her console, plotting the course. The Nova turned, facing the alien flagship head-on. Behind them, the smaller ships fell back, perhaps worried about being caught in their own flagship's line of fire. "Pat," Anderson called down. "How about now?" "Done," Wells shouted triumphantly. "Quantum resonance weapons are online. But, sir, we'll only get a few shots before the drive burns out." "Mr. Cooper," Anderson leaned forward in his chair. "Target their flagship's forward shield generator. Everything we've got." The Nova's weapons powered up, humming with the same quantum energy that drove the ship. The sound vibrated through every deck, making teeth rattle and hands shake. Cooper took careful aim. Target locked. Fire. The Nova's guns blazed with brilliant blue-white energy. The quantum-enhanced beam struck the alien flagship's shields and passed right through them. The massive ship's shield generator exploded in a spectacular flash, leaving a gaping hole in its defenses. For a moment, everything stopped. The alien ships seemed frozen in surprise. Then the flagship began to turn away, trying to protect its vulnerable spot. "Their shields operate on quantum frequencies," Wells shouted excitedly. "The modifications worked. We can hurt them." Anderson allowed himself a fierce grin. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we found their weakness." He turned to Cooper. "Target their engines. Let's show them what else this quantum drive can do." The Nova surged forward, her weapons charging for another shot. The smaller alien ships scrambled to protect their flagship, but they had lost their air of invincibility. David had just proved Goliath could bleed, and the battle was far from over. The damaged alien flagship retreated behind a wall of smaller ships, but the U.S. Nova had drawn first blood. Captain Anderson watched as Engineer Wells' readings poured across his screen, showing exactly how their quantum weapons had broken through the enemy's shields. "Pat, what's our status?" Anderson called down to engineering. "Not good, sir," Wells replied, her voice tight with stress. "The quantum drive is overheating. We've got maybe 2 more shots at full power before something breaks permanently." The ship shook as more alien vessels opened fire. Cooper's hands danced across his weapons console, returning fire with conventional weapons to keep them at bay. "Lieutenant Miller," Anderson turned to his navigation officer, "what's their formation telling you?" Miller studied her tactical display. "They're protecting that flagship like it's made of gold, sir. But look at this." She pointed to a pattern in the enemy movements. "Every time we hit them with the quantum weapons, all their ship's shields flicker for a split second. They're somehow linked together." Anderson leaned forward, his mind racing. "Pat, could their whole fleet be using the same shield frequency?" "Hold on." Wells went quiet for a moment, checking readings. "Yes, they're all networked. It must make their shields stronger when they work together. But," her voice turned excited, "Captain, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work." "Those are my favorite kinds of ideas, Pat. What do you need?" "I can reverse the quantum drive's polarity. Instead of firing focused beams, we could create a quantum resonance wave. If their shields are all linked, it would disrupt their entire network at once." Cooper looked up from his station. "The whole fleet, all at once?" "Yes," Wells said. "But, sir, it would fry our drive completely. We'd be dead in space." Another hit rocked the Nova. "Shields at 40%, Cooper reported. "We can't take much more of this." Anderson made his decision. "Do it, Pat." But first, he opened a channel to all hands, all non-essential personnel to escape pods. "This is not a drill. I repeat, all non-essential personnel abandon ship immediately." Miller turned to him. "Sir, stay at your post, Lieutenant. I need my best pilot." Anderson managed a small smile. "Mr. Cooper, target everything we've got at their flagship's engines. The moment their shields drop, I want that ship crippled." "Aye, sir." Cooper nodded, his jaw set with determination. In engineering, Wells worked frantically to modify the quantum drive. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and warning alarms blared constantly. "Starting quantum resonance wave," she reported. Sir, this will take 3 minutes to build up enough power. We'll be vulnerable. Lieutenant Miller, evasive pattern Delta. Keep us alive for 3 minutes. Anderson opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Hayes, this is Nova. We're about to attempt something that will either win this battle or leave us helpless. Request backup at Saturn's rings, just in case this works. Hayes' voice crackled back. All available ships are already on their way, Captain. Good hunting. The next 3 minutes were the longest of their lives. The Nova ducked and weaved through enemy fire, her conventional weapons blazing to keep the aliens back. 1 minute passed, then 2. Emergency pods launched from the ship's sides, carrying most of the crew to safety. 30 seconds to resonance wave. Wells called out. Drive temperature critical. Enemy ships closing in, Cooper reported. They know we're up to something. Miller's hands flew over her controls, trying to give us some space. 10 seconds, Wells shouted. Brace for impact. Anderson gripped his chair. Now, Pat, do it now. The quantum drive screamed as Wells reversed its polarity. A visible wave of blue-white energy burst from the Nova in all directions. As it passed through the alien fleet, ship after ship's shields flickered and died. The flagship's defenses collapsed completely. All weapons, fire, Anderson ordered. Cooper unleashed everything they had left. Torpedoes, energy beams, and conventional bullets streaked toward the flagship's exposed engines. The massive ship's rear section erupted in a series of explosions. But the Nova was paying the price. The quantum drive whined, then died with a final, thunderous bang that shook the whole ship. Drive is completely burned out, Wells reported grimly. We're running on emergency power only. Sir, Miller pointed to her screen. The alien fleet, they're in chaos. Their ships are drifting, weapons offline. Whatever we did, it worked. Anderson watched as the mighty alien armada fell into disarray. Without their linked shields, and with their flagship crippled, they were just ships, vulnerable, breakable ships. Send word to Earth, he ordered softly. The aliens can be beaten. And tell our backup to hurry. We're not going anywhere for a while. The Nova floated in space, her quantum drive dead, but her mission accomplished. Around them, Saturn's rings glittered with debris from the battle, marking the place where humanity had proved it wouldn't go quietly into the night. The U.S. Nova drifted in space, her quantum drive dead, but her crew far from beaten. Captain Anderson watched the alien fleet's disarray with grim satisfaction. Their mighty ships floated without power, their linked shield network completely destroyed by the quantum resonance wave. Engineering, status report. Anderson called down to Wells. Main power is gone, she replied, coughing through the smoke in engineering. Running on backup batteries. Life support is stable, but that's about it. The quantum drive. Well, there's not much left of it. Cooper's voice cut through the dim bridge. Sir, 3 alien destroyers are getting their power back. They're turning toward us. The massive ships, each one larger than the Nova, were indeed moving again. Their weapons began to glow with deadly energy. How long until Earth's ships arrive? Anderson asked Miller. She checked her failing instruments. 20 minutes at best, sir. Anderson nodded slowly. Too long. He pressed his comm button. Pat, is there anything left in the quantum drive? Anything at all? Wells was quiet for a moment. There's residual energy in the core. But sir, if we try to use it. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Could we make one more quantum weapon burst? Anderson asked. Yes, Wells replied. But it would blow the core completely. We'd have about 30 seconds to abandon ship before it goes critical. The alien ships were closing in. Their weapons would be in range within 2 minutes. Anderson stood from his chair. Lieutenant Miller, set course directly for the flagship. Mr. Cooper, divert all remaining power to forward shields. He opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship immediately. This is not a drill. Miller turned in her chair. Sir, I can stay. Helping the ship. Anderson shook his head. You've done enough, Rachel. Get to an escape pod. That's an order. He looked at Cooper. You too, James. Get moving. Cooper hesitated, then nodded. Both officers ran for the emergency exit behind the bridge. Pat, Anderson called down to engineering. You need to go too. Someone has to stay and trigger the core overload. Wells replied firmly. The automated systems are fried. It has to be done manually. Pat. It's been an honor, Captain. Her voice was steady. I'll give you 2 minutes to get clear, then light this candle. Anderson felt his throat tighten. The honor was mine, Pat. He turned off the comm and ran for the last escape pod. From the tiny window of his pod, Anderson watched the Nova grow smaller as he drifted away. The alien ships were almost in firing range. Then he saw it. The Nova's engines flickered one last time with brilliant blue light. The dying ship accelerated straight toward the alien flagship. Engineer Patricia Wells stood in the smoking ruins of engineering, her hand steady on the quantum core controls. Numbers on her screen counted down the seconds. She thought of her family back on Earth, of all the families who would live because of what they had done today. Come on, baby, she whispered to the ship. One last run. The Nova streaked toward the enemy fleet, its hull beginning to break apart from the unstable quantum energy building inside. The alien ships opened fire, but it was too late. The quantum core went critical just as the Nova reached the flagship. The explosion was magnificent. A sphere of pure quantum energy erupted from the Nova's heart, engulfing the flagship and 2 destroyers. When the light, 1 month after the Battle of Saturn's Rings, Captain Thomas Anderson stood at a podium in front of the United Nations building in New York. Behind him, a massive hologram showed the U.S. Nova as she had been before her final battle. The crowd stretched as far as he could see. Thousands of people gathered to honor the ship and her crew. The Nova was just one ship, Anderson began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. But she proved that humanity cannot be judged by the size of our fleet or the number of our weapons. She proved that our strength lies in our creativity, our courage, and our unwillingness to back down from any challenge. In the front row, Lieutenant Miller and James Cooper sat in their dress uniforms, their new medals gleaming in the sunlight. Next to them sat an empty chair with Engineer Patricia Wells' picture and medal. Her family watched from nearby, proud tears in their eyes. Today we've learned much from the alien technology we captured, Anderson continued. Their ships have given up their secrets, and humanity's scientists are already building new vessels with combined human and alien technology. But more importantly, we've learned something about ourselves. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. We learned that Earth stands united. When the aliens came to conquer us, they didn't find a planet divided.